One of the more interesting things that people aren't noticing that we're trying to draw attention to is the criminals are more often using your own tools or commonly available non-malicious tools as a part of their compromise. And so we're really trying to push organizations to monitor that more closely.
Thank you, Dan and Chet, for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
It's a pleasure to have you on. So with an uptick in attacks of remote computing infrastructure, what insight can you share about evolving attacker techniques and behaviors, especially as we start to talk about other malware attacks like ransomware?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we've clearly seen is as people have moved to the remote work world of post-COVID, a lot of IT shops had to, move that very quickly. They leave some chinks in the armor, makes it easier for attackers to get in there and find ways in. And one of the things they're trying to do is take information that they can use in later attacks to come in very stealthy. And as we've seen a lot of the new ransomware attacks, they're much more state actor-like in the skills and techniques that they use. Chad, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, well, I think in the end, a lot of this comes to credentials, and there's a lot of ways to get them. And some of that's been through these network infrastructure attacks. Sometimes it's phishing. But in most of the ransomware cases we look at, they're coming in through some sort of remote access technology. And more often than not, they're using credentials they've acquired somewhere. So because they're an authorized user, it's often more difficult for organizations to initially understand that they've been compromised.
Today, you're sharing with us new ransomware research from Sophos Labs. What does this research mean for solution providers in the industry?
Well, I think the channel itself, those that are doing managed service providing type functions are becoming targets themselves. And I think that's kind of new as well. I mean, historically, the channel was there to provide services and advice, as Dan was talking about, but we've also seen attackers turning to attacking the channel itself, trying to use the channel as a way to gain access into end user organizations and victimize them through that trust relationship. So I think there's been a lot of change in the last 12 months, especially for the channel to both understand the huge demand that their customers have for security knowledge, and that many of them are too small to have it themselves and are looking for the channel to provide that to them, but the channel needing to secure their own systems as they become targets themselves.
And Chet, I'm happy you brought that up because we've been hearing an increase in MSP breaches, and we're also hearing from partners there's a demand for managed services in the age of COVID-19. So how are you helping partners get started?
I think it's a layered human defense, just like the product portfolio. Dan talks about the different products and technologies we provide that help us build that layered defense. And I think the channel is an important part of that layered defense when it comes to the consulting and human side of defending the networks. The customers look to the channel to provide them security services because often the end customer is too small to maybe have a full-time security staff. And we provide a backstop to the channel with all the expertise from Sophos Labs for when there's incidents to give them the deep knowledge they need to help resolve those incidents.
Yeah, so one of the ways we're helping them get started is by providing them the technology both for their own internal security measures, but also the technology to provide to their customers that can handle these new advanced attacks. The fact that there's different attacks unfolding because of COVID-19, the remote nature of what we're doing, and a full portfolio across network, endpoint, mobile, server, you name it. And then on the research side, it's that education. It's keeping the MSPs up to speed on all the recent attacks they need to be conscious of, tools that we can use to help them decipher, investigate, and proactively protect against those.
What did you find most striking about the research conducted?
To me, it was the newest evasion techniques to bypass a lot of security tools. That's not something we have really seen previously. So it's really important for organizations out there to understand that the adversary is no longer just tools. It's very clever humans operating those tools, and they need to be prepared for a human adversary, not just another virus or a worm.
Yeah, and I think on top of it, it's those adversaries not necessarily trying to do broad damage, but get the most valuable resources and control those. That's where the money is in it for them. So if you're in healthcare, it's going to be health data, financial service, financial data, and then also what we're seeing is it's not relegated to just large companies. It's relegated to everybody. Everybody's been hit by ransomware. There's data that's important to you regardless of what type of business you're in and who you are, and they know how to get in there, and then they know how to get that valuable data.
Now, what are some signs you're about to be hit by ransomware?
Well, a lot of the signs start out with things that we would call living off the land, which is a fancy way of saying the criminals are using your own tools or tools like your tools in order to sort of investigate your network and find things that they're looking to compromise. So early signs often are, activity of those tools when you're not using them. So if you have change control windows, those kinds of things, that's a good practice to know that this is when the tools should be used, and then monitoring for those tools being used after hours. And those tools may be things like network scanners, PowerShell. These are things that many admins use, but generally probably in a certain pattern that the criminals are going to stand out when they use them. Another thing is that very thing. Those tools being used where they shouldn't be used is another sign to watch for. For example, servers typically are not where you would conduct a network scan or looking across your network and capturing network packets or those types of things. And the criminals often only gain access to the servers initially because that's what's facing the internet. And so they have to run those tools in that unusual environment. What you're really trying to do here is look for all of the things that are unusual. So you have to know what usual is and create good processes so that you have a good baseline to detect those anomalies. Because it's not always just malware they're bringing along. They're often looking like a rogue admin after hours.
How about in today's world of social media? What role does that play in ransomware attacks?
Well, I think it needs to be part of people's incident response plan because that is your image to the customer in many cases in a much more interactive fashion than simply posting a bulletin on your website or having a recording on your telephone line. People expect to interact with your customer service personnel, your tech support personnel, over Twitter, and a sense of disarray is not something that you really want to have out there when there may be rumors flying about you being a victim of a cyber attack. I think most of the organizations that we've seen handle this well with regard to things like Twitter and Facebook have just been very upfront about it and say, our systems are down, we're looking into it, this may be a cyber attack. And I think most people understand that you're a victim when these things happen, right? I don't think there's any shame necessarily. Obviously, we all like to think that our security is strong and that we've invested in it to defend ourselves, but these attackers are very clever, and when they break in, I think it's important to remember that you're a victim and just let people know so that they have some sympathy while you get yourself back in the saddle.
What value does this research bring to the channel?
I think the pandemic has for a lot of people, moved them toward modernizing their approach to security. A lot of organizations were doing what's referred to as zero trust networking, where kind of everything is available on the internet, and you rely more on authenticating who people are and ensuring only the right people are accessing those systems. And organizations, based on what we've seen with a ransomware study we did a few months ago, some of the stuff that we're seeing in the research that we're releasing now, shows that organizations that were doing that were more resilient to these kinds of attacks. And coincidentally, the pandemic has also pushed people into doing these good practices as well, because since we're all at home now, we understand that we need to make more and more systems available from home safely, and this is the safe way to do it. So we're really hoping that all this information, one, helps people plug the gaps in their current strategy so that they have the safest approach forward, but also demonstrates to them that by adopting some of these techniques that benefit the work from home environment, they're also benefiting themselves and defending against the latest ransom attacks.
I think that one takeaway for me is that this is now a human adversary. It's not just a machine. It's not just malware. And so to combat that, you need a combination of product and human intelligence as well.